Hello and welcome to your Daily Word.
Welcome back to our Daily Word. I'm Pastor David, and today we are going to continue with biblical snapshots. I've pulled one out of the album from the life of Joseph. For this picture, we will read from the scriptures in Genesis 45, first 8 verses. Then Joseph could not restrain himself before all those who stood by him, and he cried out, "Make everyone go out from me." So no one stood with him while Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he wept out loud, and the Egyptians and the house of Pharaoh heard it. And then Joseph said to his brothers, "I'm Joseph. Does my father still live?" But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed in his presence. And Joseph said to his brothers, "Please come near to me." So they came near. Then he said, "I am Joseph your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. But now do not therefore be grieved or angry with yourselves, because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. For these 2 years the famine has been in the land, and there are still 5 years in which there will be neither plowing or harvesting. And God sent me before you to preserve a posterity for you in the earth, and to save your lives by great deliverance. So now, it was not you who sent me here, but God." You see, Joseph had to reveal himself to them because they couldn't recognize their younger brother. After all, he was just a 17-year-old teenager when their jealousy and envy drove them to turn him over. It was only by the grace of God that they did not let him die and rot in the bottom of a well. But God, at the opportune moment, caused a caravan of Ishmaelite traders to come by, and so his brothers sold him for 20 shekels of silver, and he was to be taken down into Egypt to be a slave. Yes, Joseph suffered for 22 years because of the sibling rivalry that existed in their household, that was brought about by their father, who had 2 wives. Their sibling rivalry then turned into jealousy because the father loved Joseph so much, and he demonstrated it publicly, even giving him a special coat of many colors. Then God revealed to Joseph in a dream what his ultimate plan was for Joseph's life. Joseph, without knowing all the details, just began to tell his brothers and his father and mother about what God was going to do, and how in the dream one day they would all bow down before him. Well, that just made them all the angrier. And because of their anger, because of their grief, Joseph was sold into slavery. For 22 years he was a slave. He was unjustly thrown into prison for a crime he was falsely accused of. He was forgotten by those whom he helped and those he served faithfully and loyally. And now, those whose actions had led to his 22 years of abandonment, suffering, slavery, incarceration, they're standing before him, and he holds the upper hand. He is now in power. He has the power of being the second in all of Egypt at his full disposal. How will he respond? Well, verse 3 tells us his brothers were speechless with the revelation that this was their brother Joseph that they'd sold into slavery. Of course, they were stunned, speechless, even fearful, for they knew their own guilt and what they'd done so many years ago. They knew he was very powerful now, and their lives were in his hands. But Joseph, he didn't take retribution or vengeance. Listen, in verse 5 it says, "But now do not therefore be grieved or angry with yourself because you sold me here. Because God sent me before you to preserve life. And God sent me before you to preserve a posterity for you in the earth, and to save your lives by great deliverance. So it's not you who sent me here, but God." Joseph lived a life for 22 years of great pain, suffering, both physically, emotionally, and even psychologically. How could he not be upset and angry with them? I'll tell you, it was because he came to understand that the hand of God Almighty was ultimately directing his life. Of course, he was given the privilege of seeing that ultimate destiny being fulfilled right before his very eyes, even as God revealed to him so many years before, as his brothers would bow before him. Many times we go through things in life that cause us pain and hardships. And sometimes they're due to our own fault, but sometimes they're due to the unkind and sometimes cruel actions of others. and they impact our lives, and they cause the direction or the course of our life to suddenly change. Joseph was able to see the sovereign hand of the Lord in it all, and he was able to overcome the temptation of taking retribution or payback. And that eventually brought about healing, not only for Joseph, but for his father and for all of his brothers as well. Now, you may be tempted to think, yeah, that was easy for Joseph. He was able to see it brought to completion. That's why he could take that position and have that attitude. So let me ask you, why do you think God has recorded this story, has taken this snapshot and put it in the album of his word? It's so that you and I can see how God works in the lives of his people, how his sovereign hand is often at work, but in an unseen manner in our lives, only to be understood when it is fully brought to completion. Let me ask you, what is it you struggle with? What is it that has enslaved you or your heart? What injustice, what relationship, what set of circumstances causes you to be angry or bitter or hold a grudge? You see, you can only be set free from anger, resentment, pain, and the desire for retribution if you can see God as sovereign. That your life and the circumstances of your life are in his hands. And what others may have said or done for evil, God has allowed it because he meant it for good. He simply asks you to trust him, to walk in your circumstances, believing by faith that he will direct your steps and that he is working all things together for good. God doesn't ask you to understand how he'll work it all out. He just asks you to believe that he will and to trust his word on the matter.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Come back tomorrow for the next Daily Word. God bless.